Welcome back to the Onward Shift podcast. Today, we're really fortunate to have George with us. Now, George and I will be talking about a topic which is, George, how would you best describe this topic?
Masculinity. I mean, it's it's definitely not a light topic. It's not
No,
it's not one for the faint-hearted to get into. There's no other way of explaining it really.
absolutely. And I'd love to know a little bit about you, a bit about your background, the book you're writing, which I'm super excited to read, by the way. I'll drop the link in the bio so people can pre-order that. George, please, I'd love to know a bit more about you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me on today, Vish. And yeah, my name's George, and my work is basically focused around trying to redefine what it means to be a man and redefine what our definition is of masculinity. That's really tied up from my own experiences with mental health issues in the past, which, to be honest, stemmed from my sense of masculinity or my sense of what I felt I had to do to be a man, not kind of matching up with who I actually was. So it's a really personal one for me, but I think I've been really passionate about being in this space because it is a real problem. I do genuinely believe it is one of the biggest problems facing us today. And I think that can feel like a punchy thing to say sometimes. I think that it can be punchy to say that men are facing a challenge and we need to talk more about it. But I just think that is the reality that, the stats are quite clear that men are dying in their hundreds of thousands every single year all around the globe prematurely. So, that means they should still be here. They're dying from things that are preventable or treatable, but they're no longer here. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But I think one of those reasons and the area that I'm really passionate about is because of this sort of rigid sense of masculinity, this very kind of rigid interpretation of masculinity that we sort of pass down on men from generation to generation. And it's one that, among other things, values emotional suppression rather than
Mm.
expression. And it has this sort of deep kind of fear or resistance to strong interpersonal connections. So we tend to kind of keep people at arm's length, or we keep vulnerability out of our relationships and out of our connections. I think these two things are part of the reason that, how big that reason is, I don't think we can define, but it's at least part of the reason why men are killing themselves or dying from cancer or cardiovascular disease or, having an addiction. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And I
Mm.
really believe that is a big part of the problem. And yeah, that's what I'm passionate about trying to change. But as we've already said at the start, it's a big topic and it's not an easy one.
Absolutely. I'd like to just start on touching back on yourself, if that's okay, because I've got this. I'll be vulnerable here and share. The reason I started Onward Shift was through my mental health challenges, through my own personal experience. I've got ADHD, I've got OCD. I've never quite fit in. I don't have friends. It's really sad to say this out loud, but the friends I have, I may see, I don't know, George, once every 6 to 9 months, and I assure you, there's not like 10 of them. There's one or two people I may see every now and then. So Onward Shift for me was really personal, and I'd love to, if you're comfortable sharing that, is I'd love to understand your mental health challenges, and because masculinity is a huge topic at the moment, and I'm sure we'll touch on this later, but us changing from, well, I personally hate the words toxic masculinity because it's toxic, or it's like toxic and masculinity shouldn't be combined. It's masculinity or toxic. It's not, they're just toxic people. But I'd love to understand your mental health journey and what led you into masculinity, if that's
Yeah.
okay to share.
Yeah, of course, mate, and we'll get on to the other stuff because I think it is really interesting and important to the whole debate around masculinity, how we talk about it and the language we use. But I think for me specifically, I really struggled with my mental health about 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, and I was in a pretty difficult place. So I was started with what I now know as depression, anxiety, and I didn't do anything about it because didn't know I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know I was allowed to feel that way as a man. I didn't know I was allowed to talk about it. So I didn't do anything about it. And as I'm sure you'll know with this stuff, if you leave it, it doesn't just get better. I think that's I come back to this emotional suppression piece that we've kind of been taught as men. We're sort of taught to suppress, avoid, ignore, as though that is like a solution, whereas actually all this stuff is doing is just building up in us, or it's just kind of like sweeping the dirt under the rug, but the dirt is still there under the rug, right? And it's just going to build.
100%.
So I was very, very focused on just suppression and just suppressing how I was feeling. That eventually turned into suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, and that was pretty much my day, my life. I don't know the time frame. It was a kind of very, very hazy period, but at least a year, really. I mean, that it was just all consuming, really. I mean, it was the first thing I thought about when I woke up, and it was just a constant, all day, every day. These thoughts. It was kind of like my only goal was to get through to the end of the day, really, or yeah, that was my only mission. But it was exhausting. It was exhausting getting through to the end of the day. I mean, it felt like each day was 15 days long, when the only thing I was just trying to battle was my own mind, really. It was really challenging. I mean, really, really difficult. And I think it was very much at the point for me of it was all consuming. And I was kind of at the point where I was pretty sure, like pretty convinced that I was going to be taking my own life. It was more just a case of when. And it's so surreal, like family or people around me talking about plans a year out from now. And in my head, I was like, well, I probably won't be here to see them. So that was kind of the realm I was in. How many people did I tell that? How many people had I been honest with about that? I'm sure you can guess the answer, and I'm sure most people can. Like, it was a zero. Just
Yeah.
nobody. I didn't tell anyone. And it was not through lack of people around me or family or anything like that. It wasn't that I wasn't able to speak, or I had a phone, I could message people. That there was no barriers in place to me opening up to people around me, other than this huge barrier of my sense of masculinity, which told me that I cannot talk about these things. You do not talk about them. If you even admit to having them, you're broken, you're a failure, you're weak. You can't show that to anyone else. And it was so innate and ingrained in me, and I think it is for a lot of other men, that I wasn't even having that conversation with myself each day. I wasn't there like, oh, do I open up about this? Like, should I? What are the pros and cons? I just never even got to that point. It's like it immediately gets shut down in our mind. Like, as a man, you don't even consider opening up, because
Yeah.
the doing that is like a death sentence to a man. So
That's so sorry. I'll just yeah, I can relate to that, and it does feel like a death sentence, doesn't it? To be that vulnerable, to be that open, even with your closest of close people, yeah,
yeah,
is yeah. I completely understand where you're coming from there. Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. It's actually crazy. I think when you actually unpack it, like, it's like we assume that the world's just going to come crumbling down, and you're gonna utter the words like, I need help, and then like the floor is going to cave in and swallow you up, and we kind of really catastrophize with it. And
Absolutely.
I think looking back, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff to this, but I think looking back, I feel it kind of saddens me that I didn't give people a chance to help me, because eventually
Mm,
I did open up. Someone called me out for being out of character. They told me I was really cold, I was being really cold and distant, which isn't in my personality. And it was like a slap around the face. It was like, it really just stopped me in my tracks, because I thought I was just fighting this battle on my own, and it was my own to fight, and either I would win it or I wouldn't. In which case I'd have to just take my own life. That was literally the equation, which again is insane. But I
mm,
think when someone externally was like, "Oh, something about you is off," it was just like it was weird. It just sort of pulled me out of some sort of reality, and then I just sort of mumbled like, something's going on with my mind, and I don't know what it is. I think those were the only words I had, and that then kick-started a whole bunch of stuff, of people kind of getting me into doctor surgeries and therapies and stuff like that. So I'm condensing a big recovery journey there, but
of course.
that was that. But I think looking back, I just feel sad that I didn't give people that chance earlier on, because actually once that snowball did start, all I found around me was love and support and people that wanted to help me. And maybe people didn't understand it or didn't really have the words for it, and it's awkward and embarrassing, all the rest of it, but the world didn't end. Like, people were there for me, but I never gave people that chance because of this warped sense of like masculine ego and masculine pride. I was so determined to defend that I was going to defend that at the cost of my own life. And really, I think when you just spell that equation out, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, it really, really doesn't make any sense. So I think that was the position, the place I was in, and it was very, very focused on. I was very focused on mental health, and once I started going to doctor surgeries and stuff, it was about the diagnosis. You have a major depressive disorder, you have generalized anxiety disorder. Here's some antidepressants, like, go and try meditation or whatever. It was very prescriptive and very focused on mental health. And actually, I got better, and then, but I felt passionate about going to the mental health space. So I went into the mental health space and spent a lot of time working with coaches and therapists and having my own therapy. I think as I got deeper into it, it became really clear that actually, it wasn't the mental health issues. That was the sort of what's happening at the surface, and that was like the lagging indicator, sort of downstream of a problem. And actually, going upstream, I realized it was my sense of masculinity that got me to that point. It was, trying to be who I thought I had to be as a man versus who I wanted to be, or not talking, or trying to impress people, or trying to do certain things I didn't really want to do, but because I thought I had to. It was all that kind of stuff that created the environment for the mental health issues to come in and fester, I guess. So I became really passionate about masculinity then, because I knew that's where it all started for me. I know where it starts for a lot of men as well. Not to dismiss mental health struggle or anything like that, by the way. It's just I knew that if I had a better sense of myself as a man when I was younger, and I had better lessons around emotional vulnerability and expression and compassion and empathy and what your emotions are, and they're not good or bad. If I'd had all of that, would I have ended up getting to the place where I was suicidal? I can't obviously answer that question, but I really believe it would be no. I really, really don't think I would have got there. So that's why I'm here. Basically, that's why I'm doing this. It's deeply, deeply personal for me, and I know there's other men that there are other men that are going through this every single day. Many of them don't make it. So
I just want to say, it's not often I'm very quiet on my podcasts, but God blimey, what you said there resonated a lot with me, and this is something that I have never shared before ever. But I'll share it today, and that's: have you ever had a goodbye phone call? Like, I've had goodbye phone calls. So when I've been really in some dark places in life, I've picked up the phone to the closest people to me and had a goodbye phone call.
wow.
And they didn't even know it was a goodbye phone call.
Wow.
They didn't have a clue. But just through talking for over an hour about everything that's going on in my head, it wasn't a goodbye phone call. It was I'll give tomorrow a go.
Wow.
And yeah, honestly, I've never shared that before. What have you done? What have you done, George?
Yeah. It's like therapy, this, isn't it?
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, but yeah, I'll be honest. Yeah, sorry, I'll be honest. It was phone calls where I was like, I'm good. I'm content with my decision, but clearly not. It's sometimes all it takes is one conversation to shift your mindset, and tomorrow's okay. And I'll be honest, I've had a couple of those calls in my life, and that was only maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So it shows life can be in the darkest of places, but God damn it, persevere with the positivity. Take that first step to seek help. Speak to friends, family. Just if you're a guy or a woman listening to this, God damn it, if you're in that space, please, 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 please go speak to someone. Don't do something that you can't come back from. Go speak to someone, man. So, George, thank you so much, because your vulnerability opened up mine. So, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing. And I think what just happened there is the perfect example of why we need to have more of these conversations, because vulnerability breeds more vulnerability, and we're all going through stuff. It could be bigger than, you know, other people's, or it could be smaller. Although I don't like to kind of label it that way, because everyone's thing is the big thing to them. We're all going through stuff, but life, particularly for men, has just become this weird performance where it's like we're constantly having to, it's performative. Like we're just walking around wearing a mask, trying to show others that life is great. Social media has poured fuel on that fire, but actually everyone's going through stuff, and sometimes it just takes someone to put up a hand and say, do you know what, I'm not doing great at the moment. And then I feel like other people just breathe a sigh of relief, because they're like, oh, do you know what, me too. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think, you know, for my story and for your own, it just shows that we really do want connection. And that's the other thing that I touched on, the other sort of tragedy with I think what we teach men now is that we teach them to kind of fear these deep interpersonal connections, these deep bonds, because it's like, you know, an attack on their own strength or independence or whatever. But we are literally biologically wired for human connection. I mean, it's not like a, you know, a fantasy or a sort of hobby for some people. It is literally, we're literally biologically wired for it. So to avoid it is to avoid our natural needs of our bodies. But when we seek it out, when we have it, as was the case with me, as was the case with you, it's really disarming. And I think, you know, mental health issues and, you know, things like depression, suicidal thoughts, they want you on your own. That they thrive with you on your own. Like the lonelier you are, the bigger they get. And actually, it takes one phone call. You know, it's why the Samaritans is such a kind of lifeline for people, because it's just, as you say, you make a plan, but then you make a plan thinking that you almost don't deserve to be here anymore. But one phone call, that, as in your case, they didn't even know that was the role they were playing, but it can just help to shrink some of those feelings of loneliness we have. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that as well.
Yeah, wow. I didn't think 18 minutes in we'll be talking. So, yeah, we skipped the fun part, didn't we? We went straight in there. I appreciate that, but I'd love to learn. Obviously, I know you can't give too much away, but you've plucked up the courage to write a whole book on this. Now, one, as I said, it takes courage to do that, especially in this day and age where men are slightly under attack, and there's so many different narratives being pushed out. It's confusing. So if you can, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your book, obviously without giving away some of the big things.
Yeah. So it's coming out in January, the book. So not too far away now. I probably feel like it will fly by. I basically, when I was having the call with the publisher around what we were going to write on and what I was going to write on, I started with mental health, and I was like, I think it's been done. I'm not saying that it's everything's perfect, and, you know, people that are struggling get a fair platform or fair equality or whatever it might be. But I was like, I think there's a lot of stuff out there now on mental health generally. Like, I think awareness generally is in a good place. Doesn't mean that kind of action is, but I think there's good awareness there. So then I was like, I think if we kind of niche that down into men, I think the conversation around men and men's mental health and masculinity is so far back from where it needs to be. Like, where maybe the conversation has moved on in recent times on mental health, where it's maybe moved on in terms of feminism and women. You know, again, I'm not saying everything's perfect there, but I think women have had a sort of rallying call in recent years around, you know, things like the Me Too movement. They kind of had sort of flags in the ground that they can all kind of rally around. You know, not everyone does, but there's at least been quite clear movements. I think they've been able to move forward a little bit in some ways. I just don't think men have had that on either side, men's mental health or masculinity. I think it's stuck quite far back, and I think that's killing men. I do think that is literally killing men. When I talk about this stuff, sometimes I sort of almost get questioned on why I'm talking about it, or, you know, it's kind of made to feel like we don't have a right to talk about it.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I sort of almost have compassion and empathy for people that come at me with that view, because I understand, you know, there's their own stuff in that, their own experiences. And I think particularly for women who often have, unfortunately, a negative story about a man in some way, I can understand why there's like quite strong feeling around this stuff. But I think why this is so important for me is that it is literally killing men. Like the stats are pretty clear on that. Globally, one man takes his life every single minute. So how long have we been on this call? We've been this 21 minutes. So 21 men have taken their own life somewhere in the world, in the time we've been recording this. Just in the UK, 15 men die prematurely every single hour from a whole bunch of stuff. It should have been preventable. They could still be here, but they're not. So I think the case for me is quite clear about why we should talk about this stuff. And I think once I was really, really clear on that in my mind, I was like, I knew that's what I need to do the book on. I know that's what I need to do the book on. So really what I focused on is almost that as the problem. Like, we need to address masculinity. And the book itself is about, or arguing for, an expanded sense of masculinity. So I don't believe in attacking men. I don't believe in attacking any group. I don't believe in kind of attacking traditional masculinity. And this isn't about moving from one extreme to the other. I think often the conversation for me around masculinity is far too basic and binary. I think people literally see it as, on one hand, we have like Andrew Tate at the extreme end, and then on the other hand, it's like this extreme sense of vulnerability, and it's, men should be allowed to cry. That is often the only conversation we have on men. And actually, I think for a lot of men, they sit in the middle. They don't agree or align with Andrew Tate, but also they don't really want to be this kind of extreme, overly soft, emotional type of man. So they just
George,
feel,
it's interesting you say that, because that's exactly where I stand. I haven't been conditioned to cry through my childhood all the way up until being an adult. I haven't been taught how to cry, so it's not something that I'm comfortable with. So I don't necessarily cry, which is strange. But I also think Andrew Tate has some really, really extremist viewpoints. So I'm exactly that guy who's flat bang in the middle. So yeah, sorry, I just wanted to share that. I think you're absolutely spot on.
great. Yeah, no, I'm glad, and I'm sure it'll be the case for many of your listeners as well. Like, I think that, if the only antidote we have to something like Tate is, our men should be allowed to cry, I just think you miss a whole bunch of people. So
Yeah.
that's what I've taken as the focus of the book, is really just expanding our sense of masculinity. And that means that if there are parts of traditional masculinity that you value and align with, then that is absolutely fine. I think traditional masculinity has been demonized, and it has become very, very interchangeable with toxic masculinity, which, as we talked about, I agree. I think the language there is doing more harm than good, which we can get into. But I think, again, men are pushing back on that, because you'll have men who, they value strength, they value their physical appearance and going to the gym, and they want to earn good money, and they want to provide for their family. They like being the breadwinner. Some of these things, are healthy, they're noble, if done in the right way. I think in some ways we've almost demonized some of that, and all that does is just push men away. It makes them retreat almost further into their masculinity, because that's what they
Absolutely.
want to be. So I think, for me, that's part of the book, is acknowledging that some of those stuff is what makes masculinity and men great, and it's, it can be around, it kind of plays into hobbies that men have, and shutting that down is going to do no one any favors. But it is about expanding our sense of masculinity, and I think realizing that masculinity is on a spectrum, really, on a spectrum with femininity. It's all, I don't even like using those words, really. I think we are just talking about humanity here.
Yeah, I was just about thinking that. Yeah.
It's all just traits that we all have in different capacities, and I think what we've done is separate them into two boxes, masculinity and femininity, and we've just made it way too rigid and binary, whereas actually we are all on the same spectrum. And yes, along that spectrum, you find averages, and for example, on average, most men are stronger than most women. So that's why strength is often seen as a traditional masculine trait. However, on that spectrum, there will be some women who are stronger than most men. Like, if you locked 95% of men in a cage with a female UFC cage fighter,
Yeah, they're
you
getting
can
knocked out.
you can bet they're going to get, and you bet they cannot be saying to that woman, strength isn't for you. So
Yeah.
I think we have to acknowledge that we're all on a spectrum, and there are averages on that, sometimes quite large averages, and there are extremes, but we are still talking about a spectrum along which we all
Mm.
sit and we all slide up and down. So trying to say to men that they shouldn't be vulnerable, they shouldn't display their emotions, they shouldn't be compassionate, empathetic, that those are for women, it just doesn't make sense. Like
Mm.
biologically, it just does not make sense. And I think that really is the core premise of the book, is arguing for why we need a more expanded sense of masculinity. So I've sort of broken it up into three parts. It's looking at the problem and where the problems come from,
Mhm.
historically and biologically. Then I've looked into what it's actually doing for men, some of the ways it's causing pressure to build in men. I've looked at suicide and addictions, body image issues, eating disorders, hair loss, all this kind of stuff. I've interviewed a whole bunch of people for the book as well, which has been really nice, like real
Wow.
personal stories. Then I've gone on to what can we do about it? How can we
Mm.
actually expand our sense of masculinity? So that's kind of the book in a nutshell.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. I'm so excited to read it. You say January it's launching?
January the
Can't wait.
26th, I believe. Yeah. So yeah, we'll
Amazing.
get Christmas out of the way, and then it's on to sort of personal development and all the rest of it.
Yeah, spot on, spot on. And I think something you said that I'm reading a book called The Courage to be Disliked. And I can't remember who it's by, but it's basically a philosopher and a student or a youth, they call it, having a conversation. The youth is really negative about life, and the philosopher is trying to change his mindset. And one of the key things I've taken away from this book at the moment is every single one of us are different, but we're all equal. And I was like, gosh, that is so deep and so current. Even though the book was written a while ago, it's so current in this day and age. So although men and women are different, we are still equals. We should all be treated with that compassion, that empathy, that humanity. I think that's such a key word in this whole podcast. Humanity. We should be
Yeah,
treating each other as humans.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
and I think sadly that that gets lost. That
Mm,
quickly gets lost out of the discussion, and I think it is. I can understand why, and I think it's reasonable to say why, because unfortunately we don't live in an equal or fair society or world, right? Like people are kind of persecuted all over the place with different stuff. I mean, I live in the UK, which luckily isn't too bad. There's genocide going on elsewhere around the world, but I think when it comes to, let's say, in the UK, there is disparity in how men and women are treated, whether it's careers or pay or parental leave or whatever it might be. So we've kind of we've kind of unfortunately been set up in a system that just isn't equal and doesn't treat people equally. And I think what that has done is rightly created a lot of anger, hate, resentment, blaming
mm,
across sides. So what you said there, it just gets shut down immediately because it's almost like this fanciful ideal that
of
you know
course.
it just isn't people's reality, which is really sad. It is really sad because then when I try and talk about men needing support, I often get shut down for that reason, but by other groups that have faced kind of oppression for a lot longer or a period of time, and I can understand where the kind of rage comes from, but unfortunately what it does is it just makes the problem worse. Like
Yeah,
if you've got men who have been conditioned not to talk and they're really struggling and they put their hand up and then they get told there's other people who've got it worse than you, get back in your box,
yeah,
it just perpetuates the problem. And again, we only have to look at the stats around the way people are dying, men dying, to show us that clearly something in our approach just isn't working. So I think that the more we can get to this place of people just treating other people equally, just I mean, it sounds obvious, but the happier the world will be.
yeah,
But that means for men, it means men supporting other men, and it means women supporting men. But then that also means men supporting women,
yeah,
because it will just all create a cycle where we're all lifting each other up. It will only help each other. So, I think a big solve for this challenge with men is men taking more time with women to support women, listen to women, help women, and in turn, I think that will help the cause for masculinity.
It's so funny you say that because I've got I've got an ideology of life, and I've never shared this either, but I'm gonna give it a go today, and you can shut me down if you think I'm talking a bit of waffle. So, okay, so we've got tons, and I mean tons of female-only groups. We also have tons, which are now emerging, of only male groups. And I think that's fantastic because I think you need community within your own gender or whatever it is. But what I'm finding is the male only groups are only ever going to have a male perspective, and the female only groups will only have a female perspective. Now, at what stage are we going to learn from one another? Because if that doesn't happen, then the men will continue thinking how men think, the women will continue thinking how the women think, and there will be no collaboration. And
Yeah.
something like what you mentioned there, I think that touches my ideology because I'm like, if we continue creating separate groups for everyone, great, that group may improve, but at some stage we need to learn to get along with one another again. So I do find these gender specific groups a bit questionable sometimes,
Yeah,
especially with the amount of especially with the number of them that are being created at the moment. It's like, wow, it's a lot.
yeah, it's a really really tough one. I think probably, for men in particular, who just a lot of men just don't have a space to go anywhere, or
Mm,
as you touched on at the start, might not have a lot of friends they can be close with or vulnerable with. So I think having a men's only group can be like a lifesaver for them and a really
mm,
good resource. And actually, those sort of groups that are segregated in that way might be good for where we are at the moment. But I
mm,
do think it is really, really important that we don't just get stuck in an echo chamber of listening to people who think the same and look the same as us. Because I think that is dangerous. Then it just completely narrows your worldview. So for me, as I started the process of the book, I was putting stuff out on LinkedIn,
yeah,
potential content ideas, ways of talking about stuff, like perspectives, and it, I was almost just trying to canvas like the market, quote unquote. I wanted to just see how stuff landed, and I got some really interesting responses from people in like LGBTQ plus groups and from women, people of different races and ethnicities. It's really useful in helping me shape how the final book is. I think
absolutely,
particularly
absolutely.
I got a lot of stuff from women when I first started putting out who pushed back on me, and not because I wasn't writing, I wasn't writing anything that was dismissive of women, but actually I almost hadn't acknowledged what women had faced, and they took that absence of acknowledgement as like sort of like dismissiveness, really. And it really helped me to understand the how women are feeling, and I'll never completely understand, not having
Of
kind of been through
course.
that experience myself, but it was really really important for me, and it really, I believe, helped me shape the book in the right way, and some of my own views, and even how I'm talking on this podcast now. Um, so I do think it's really really important that we don't get stuck in an echo chamber, because all of this stuff is built alongside others. Like, masculinity isn't just a thing that lives inside of us. Like, our sense of masculinity is shaped by our relationships and what we read, what we consume, what we think about
Mm,
ourselves and others, the world. It all shapes that. So we need to kind of do that in relation to other groups
absolutely,
and stuff like that. Yeah.
100%. And yeah, I honestly, I couldn't agree with you more there. I think it's so vital to understand what women's perspective is of masculinity as well as men's, because at that stage we'll start moving forward together. And I think that's feminism or masculinity. I think the end goal here is we come together, we thrive together, we live together, and all of our lives are going to get better. And here's an interesting statistic I read today: 70% of men actually want to spend more time at home with their children, but they can't due to work. And you think to yourself, that's a huge, huge amount of men who want to spend time with their families, but they can't because of work commitments. So the truth is, I actually wrote a LinkedIn post about this, which is getting published later in the week. But we have been pushed, like society has pushed men into work, 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 work. Work on evenings, work on weekends, work as much as you possibly can because that is where your status comes from. And for that, we've sacrificed time with our families. We've sacrificed hobbies, things that interest us, that ignite a light in us. And I don't know about you, but the more men I speak to, the more I realize they don't have that spark. That that fire in their belly about speaking about football or motorbikes or whatever they're passionate about. It's that I'm seeing less of that fire, and I feel sad. I just feel sad about that. I really do, because I think men ain't boring, and I wrote about this again on a LinkedIn post later in the week. Right now, I'm hearing a lot about men are just so boring. Well, actually, why are we boring? Society has actually made us boring. We want naturally boring. Society has kind of driven us in a direction which has kind of dulled our light a bit. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I'm looking forward to the LinkedIn post because I mean, I think you're bang on. I think you're bang on the money. Like again, I think that, there's always personal accountability and agency to change in this stuff. Like I mean, obviously, everyone has their own personal circumstances, but we have the ability to go out and find new hobbies and all the rest of it. And as you said, we have created these conditions where men have been pushed into a small box. We've been told to fear these deep interpersonal connections. We've been told not to be too vulnerable. We've told not to really be that passionate unless it's about money, making more money, in
Yeah,
which case
yeah.
be passionate, be competitive, make loads of money. But other than that, don't be too emotive with it, really. I think we've
Mm,
we've forced men into this box. We've told men that they're the ones that need to go and make the money. The women stay at home and they are domesticated and they look after the kids. And then we sort of step back and ask, why have we got so many distant fathers? Or why do so many kids
mm,
feel like they're not bonding with their father? When we have, pretty much in most countries around the world, really just off balanced parental leave laws. I think that
mm,
they found there's some research somewhere, I've got it in my book, that they found that basically men are very, very similar, potentially even exactly the same natural caregivers as women when it
oh
comes
wow.
to newborn children or children.
Oh
Obviously,
wow.
there are some obviously differences, like we have to
Mm,
acknowledge of the
of course.
women carry the baby for 9 months. They go through a lot of changes physically, hormonally, in their careers, all that kind of stuff. And some women breastfeed, men don't. So there's all of that kind of extra context. Obviously, women carry a large burden there. If I put that to one side and just focus on the kind of natural caregiving abilities beyond that, they found that men and women are remarkably similar, potentially even the same. Like men go through a whole bunch of structural and hormonal changes when they have a kid. That their
Yeah.
brain literally changes to help them be more of a natural caregiver.
Hmm.
But it has to be given the conditions to be able to do that.
Mm.
One of the biggest risk factors for men. So 1 in 10 men develop postnatal depression. Not everyone knows that. Everyone thinks
Oh, didn't know that.
a lot of people think it's a women's thing, only a women thing, but 1 in 10 men can develop it as well. One of the biggest risk factors is if a newborn father or new father doesn't feel like he's bonded with his newborn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
I've heard about this.
yeah. So we've basically created a system where, let's say in the UK, I know that there is shared parental leave, but it has to be sacrificed by the mother basically. So generally you've got 2 weeks in the UK if you've had a newborn
Mm,
kid, and then you're back off to work. So not only are you now at higher risk of postnatal depression, but actually you're not being given the chance for your natural caregiving abilities to develop.
mm,
But then we have this stereotype about men that they're the second rate parent, that they're
yeah.
just babysitters while the mother is the parent. But actually, if we're forcing them back into work so soon after having a kid, and we're not creating the environment for them to then thrive as a caregiver, that's why the stereotype there. We're not giving them a chance to thrive. So I think we've created a society where men are defined very, very narrowly.
Mm,
It's defined pretty much by their status through work or money, and their physical appearance, their physical attributes. And it's always bigger means better for men. It's if you've got bigger muscles, that's better. If you've got a bigger bank
yeah.
account, that's better. And so I think a lot of men just that's all they strive to achieve. And there's nothing wrong with those things if that's what you value. But I think I come back to myself when I got off kilter. When you're
Hmm.
doing things for other people and not for yourself, that's when you can get in a tricky situation.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. I do. And again, it's with the parental leave, there's that the bonding from father to baby is actually absolutely vital for the baby as well. I was listening to a Stephen Bartlett Diary of a CEO podcast, and this conversation came up, and the guest, God, I can't remember what her name was, but she was absolutely fantastic. She was saying the only ways dads can bond with babies is by giving the baby a massage or having dedicated time to do like bath time is dad and baby time sort of thing. But again, men don't always have that time. If they're working and if they're commuting an hour and a half to work, spending 8, 9 hours at work, an hour and a half home, dinner, shower, all the rest of it, and then all of a sudden baby's asleep. And it's really hard. And I don't think these conversations are. I've never spoke to a man about this in my life. So this is the first time I'm actually going, God, yes, this is really hard. Society isn't built for dads to be caregivers. But I love that you've researched and figured out that we can be.
Yeah, I just I think the world's just moved on, and the again in the UK, I mean, the working system we operate under, it's over 100 years old now. It was
Mm,
created during the Industrial Revolution. It was built. It was a sexist system, really. I mean, it was sort of built under the assumption that men would go to work during the week while women would stay home and tend to the house, basically, and tend to kids.
mm,
I mean, it's just not the way the world works anymore, right? Like, same-sex marriage and same-sex couples, a lot more commonplace. You have women who have, lofty career ambitions, rightly, obviously. In a
mm,
lot of couples, you have both, whatever the sex is, you have both people who might be working long professional hours all week. That system hasn't changed, but the world has, and
mm,
we are suffering for it. I think that we have moved on while the system hasn't, and that's why you're seeing billions of pounds being spent on wellbeing initiatives around the globe, and yet people are not getting any happier. People are not taking their own lives any less. So I think we have to be able to step back and realize that just bringing in a meditation app for a
yeah,
business isn't going to solve
no.
the huge systemic issues we're under, that both men and women and all other groups are being kind of crushed under to different levels. But we don't like to talk about those things, do we? Because it's
Of
easier to just
course.
sort of throw a quick fix at someone and say, off you go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like such a huge culture shift in companies. I sometimes don't think it's because people don't want to do it. I think it's because they just don't know where the hell to start. This is such a huge topic, and everyone, again, I'll probably get screwed out for this, but everyone gets offended by everything. So, a company could do one thing with great intentions, and somebody in that company will be offended. It's impossible to please everyone now. So I think a lot of people, a lot of companies are just scared of, is this the right thing to do? Is this not the right thing to do? But conversations like this hopefully help. George, I'm going to ask you a question. What does it mean to be masculine to you now in comparison to what your beliefs were just, 5 years ago? What
Mm.
what what is the difference? Sorry, that's a proper deep and at you question.
No, it's a really, really good question. I think that if I go back to what it used to be, it's a very traditional sense of masculinity. So, someone who was cool, liked and cool, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Someone was, attractive to women, and who was successful with getting with women. I think that's a focal point of a lot of masculine banter and conversation and pride in a way, or at least traditionally. I think it was something that was focused around status, and could I outwardly show that I was successful in some way? And I think people do this in different ways. They perform in different ways. It could be the job title, it could be the flashy watch, it could be or clear displays of money. But it was
Mm,
for me, it's a very traditional sense of masculinity. It was successful and sort of power driven, attractive in a sort of dating sense, competitive, and I think there was definitely no room for like weakness, vulnerability,
mm,
any of that kind of stuff. Now, for me, and I think I touched on this in the book, that I don't think the solve for any of this is just me creating like a new 10-point checklist I just give to every man and say, there you go, that's how you do it, because it's just not how it works. Everyone's different, right? And
Mm.
we talked about that spectrum earlier. Everyone's along different places along there. Like for me personally, I don't have much interest in fitness aside from the health benefits of it. You know, but when I do it, I'm doing it sort of begrudgingly to stay healthy. It doesn't
Yeah,
interest me, right? So
I feel you.
right, I couldn't, honestly, I just can't be bothered. But you know, I know for a lot of men, it's something they're most passionate about. It's a hobby. It gets them out of bed in the morning. Maybe it's, you know, huge for their mental health, whatever it might be. So you know, we're all going to, you know, be different. But I think so. So for me now, but I think the sort of general characteristics that I do think men should aim for, and for me, that's just trying my best in a way that aligns for me. And you know, I think treating people with respect, all people with respect. Doesn't mean I don't value competition. I think, you know, competition has a place, but it's competition without ego, and it's competition with compassion. Yeah, respecting all groups, and I think having a really good grip on my emotions, and by that I mean that it doesn't mean that I'm in control of them always, or that they don't come in and, you know, may make me feel really crap sometimes. But I think it's having a really good understanding of what my emotions are, and being able to name them and acknowledge them, and know when something requires the right response. So,
Mm.
you know, there are times that I think we have to lean into our traditional masculine side of almost like strength and resilience, and there are times that we can go the other way and you know, almost be vulnerable or be emotional. I think for me, true masculinity is knowing the balance and knowing the split and knowing when to do what. Whereas I think, you know, traditional masculinity is about just doing one of them. It's just strength. It's suppression and strength.
Mm.
For me, masculinity is now about balance, and yeah, I think just knowing that the whole human experience, and understanding that, you know, compassion, strength is strength, but compassion is strength, and so is vulnerability. You know, I mean, sometimes this stuff can sound a bit woo woo, but I think that, you know, there's literally science behind this. Your emotions are stored in the body. They don't go just because we avoid them. So, you know, the difficult experiences that we avoid in the sort of pursuit of being more masculine, it doesn't make those emotions go. They build up in the body, and they come out at some point in some way. It
Mm.
might come out in a, you know, a small show of something. Maybe it's a small show of anger, or they can build out and they can come out in much larger ways. You know, breakdown, suicide, addiction, yeah, all kinds of stuff. So I think it is really important for us to have a grip on that full human experience. So yeah, it's just, you know, for me, just be, you know, be myself. Not trying to be anyone else's version of a man, or not trying to fit into anyone else's definition. Yes, that, you know, I still want to look good when I go out, and yes, I still think about, you know, I still get annoyed if a social media post doesn't get any likes. That stuff is there. I'm only human, but
Yeah.
I think it's detaching myself from that a bit more, and yeah, just trying to be a good person, really. And you know, if I do stuff, doing it for me, whereas before it was always doing it for other people. Like I had a hair transplant last year,
Yeah.
which is still growing through. I'm hoping it comes out in the podcast looking good.
No, it looks amazing.
Thank
Couldn't
you, mate.
even tell. Couldn't even tell.
That's I guess that's a good endorsement.
Yeah.
If I got it done a few years ago, I would have been getting it done for other people
Okay.
rather than myself. Whereas now, again, of course, I'm doing it because I want to look good to other people, and I want other people to be like, "Oh, your hair looks good." But that wasn't the main reason I went. The main reason now was for me. I did it for me and the way I wanted to feel about myself.
Yeah.
I think that's been almost the biggest shift for me with masculinity, is I'm not trying to perform to anyone else now. I'm just trying to perform for myself, really.
Love that. I love how you haven't completely dismissed the traditional masculinity, because that's who I like. For me, that's who I am. Like, I am a traditional masculine guy, right? I like to be a provider. I like to be a protector. I like to look good. I like to feel good. I like to serve. I love it. But on the same token, what I've learned through endless therapy, and I really do mean bloody endless therapy, is I also love being compassionate. I love helping other people. I love I love, this is going to sound, this is the woo woo bit I'm going to throw out there. I also love loving myself.
Yeah,
I like to go, I'm a good person. Like, it feels bloody good. And I think a lot of men forget to do that. It's too soppy. But actually, it's not. It's really, really not.
yeah. You know, all being well, touch wood, you live you live a long life. You live, let's say, 80, 90 years longer, maybe. It's a long time to live with yourself.
It
And
is.
I think if you're not at peace with the things you're doing, you're not, with doing them for yourself,
Mm.
if you're constantly having to try and perform for others, it's a long, long time to be doing that. It's a long time.
Absolutely. George, I know we are sadly, very, very, very sadly, coming up to our hour. So I wanted to drop a few questions on you.
Yep.
And you can, you know, give it your best shot. What would you, to any female listeners who have got all the way to this point, what could you tell them that would support their partners, brothers, dads, granddads, uncles, the men in their life? What can women do to be a part of this new-ish masculine way?
Yeah. I think that women have a incredibly large role to play in this. I think that some might sort of be hesitant or kind of resistant when I say that. And there's a term that's come up now called man keeping, where a lot of women
Yeah.
are feeling sort of like exhausted with essentially having to manage the men in their life and their emotions because men aren't able to do it for themselves. That's kind of the basis of it. And again, I think it's completely fair. I understand why women are feeling in that way.
Mm.
So I think we have to acknowledge that, and this isn't all on women. This isn't for all women to lead the charge. Like, men do have to be accountable for this, both for themselves and the people in their lives. That being said, I do think women have an incredibly important role to play with this. I think we might be talking sort of generally here, but I think where men have a lot of these limitations, or pretty much self-imposed limitations, but they've been handed down around suppression and not being vulnerable and all that kind of stuff. That isn't the case for most women, or most women's experiences. Again, we're talking generally here, and I know
Yeah, of
people
course.
take it differently, but I think generally women don't have that barrier when it comes to just sharing stuff. I certainly know, like with the women in my life, my girlfriend, we've had this discussion loads, and her reality just seems so different. If something goes on for her, she's straight on the phone to her group of girlmates, and they're straight away talking about it. But I think men have to build up to that point for sometimes years, really.
Yeah.
So there's a barrier that's removed for women that I think means they can role model for men. And I think for men who are still living in this performative place of peacocking and competing, often with other men, there's always a bit of a natural kind of guard up. I think if a man's opening up to another man, they're sort of sussing each other out. Like, is it really safe for me to open up? Again, I don't think
Yeah.
it's always there with women. So I think women have a really, really important role to play, whether that's opening the door or being there for a man, telling the man what they've noticed. I noticed you've been a bit like this recently, something going on. I just think, yeah, women have a role to play there. Not the whole role. And, again,
Mm.
I need to take responsibility here, but definitely do have a role to play.
I love that. I love how, yeah, I absolutely love how you said women can be a role model here. I really, really believe they can. I really do, because honestly, it's same as you. The women in my life, they've got this connection with their girlfriends or their female cousins or whatever it is, and it's beautiful. It's so nice to see that. Having a rough day, you can pick up the phone and just pour it out, and that is exactly the role models we need as men. And I love that. So
Yeah.
now let's reverse it, right? What advice could you give men to improve what their ideology is of being a man? I guess you've been walking those shoes, and I'd love to. What are your top 10 tips to give to young men or old men, all men?
So this is for themselves to how
That's
they,
right.
yeah. I think I would start really simply by just almost reflecting on what's going on for you, and what you believe and where you're at and what you're passionate about and what you're feeling, and whatever it might be, and in however you would do that, whether it's notes on your phone or just thinking in the shower or whatever. I think that is the starting point for any of this. Like, there's no point me telling someone to go and pick up go to a men's group or pick up a new hobby if they're not even sure why they're doing it, or why they're going. I mean, there's obviously an argument to be made. Sometimes you get into something and maybe you start going to therapy, and that's when you start to unpack stuff. But I think it's really important that we could just take time to reflect on ourselves and where we're at, because I think again, men have been suppressing stuff for a long time. We're sort of conditioned into working, into being busy. I think being busy is glorified for men.
Yeah.
How often do you as a man, and not you but anyone listening, sit or walk and just think? No podcast, no music, no phone. How often are you kind of doing that and processing stuff and reflecting on your emotions and the way stuff made you feel? Like, I do it now, but I've had to learn to do that and train myself, train that into a habit. Whereas before that, I was definitely scared of being on my own. Any walk had to have music on, had to have podcasts, never have silence, always got to be doing something, phone on the train. And all that does is, you're just pushing away and avoiding your own experiences. So I think it's really, really important to reflect and just, ask yourself what's going on for you, and what's going on around you. And is there a disconnect there that you'd like to break? Like, for me and my own friendship group, we had that. We were just trying to be your typical kind of lads. Like, our group was centered around drinking and late nights and all the rest of it. I think we got to a place where people would be getting really drunk and then opening up in the nightclub at 2 a.m. that actually they're going through some stuff. We're like, why do we keep waiting? Why do we have to wait until we're intoxicated for this like fear to be removed? So, me and a few mates now, we've got what we've sort of dubbed mental health meetups. It's a bit of a jokey name, but we're meeting up under the pretense of talking about how we're doing. And we get there and we each give each other a score. Sorry, we give ourselves a score out of 10 of how we're doing. And then we talk through why we're feeling that way. I think with all the stuff removed, all that, masculine ego and pride and embarrassment and shame, we know we're going there to talk about how we're feeling. We still do it in a pub with beer and all the rest of it, but that other stuff is removed. And so we do talk and share openly. I think those are like a couple of the really, really key things for me. Is first, inner reflection. And that takes a bit of work. Like, I'm not saying that someone should, can get off this podcast and will be able to sit in peace and correctly kind of identify all these different emotions and why they're coming up and all the rest of it. But I think it is important to be able to at least acknowledge what's going on. And it might not cut, you might not be able to voice it in the way you want. I think when I first opened up on how I was feeling to that person that, said I was cold, it just came out as something like, something's wrong in my mind, or something's not quite right. I mean, none of the words were there for me to be able to talk about my experience, but the important thing was I was able to start, and then as I worked through stuff and ended up going to therapy, the way I could talk about it expanded. Yeah, I think inner reflection and then just building better connections and better, stronger platonic bonds with other men. I think we need other men in our lives, whether that's brothers or friends or fathers or whatever it might be. We do need those other bonds, and we've sort of been conditioned into as we talked about, fearing the really, really, really close bond. It's we're encouraged to have mates, but it's encouraged to be laddie and full of banter and all the rest of it. And anything that gets a little bit closer than that, sadly, is sort of demonized and labeled as some sort of homophobic slur. Really, that's what we've descended into. So men avoid having those close relationships with other men for fear of being labeled that, because again, that's like another death sentence to a man, really, really sadly. So I think that we do need that, and it is also on men to break that mold. Like, we can't be relying on women to do that for us.
Absolutely.
Someone needs to lead the charge and take the charge. And yeah, just someone has to do it. It could be you that's listening to this podcast. I just think otherwise it's just a constant, you would just keep going through this cycle of men being performative. And again, that's not to shut down traditional masculinity. It's not to shut down the banter. Like, if you want to go out late nights, drinking, having the banter, that is fine. And a lot of men bond in that way. But don't do it at the expense of the other stuff as well. We sort of need that balance. So I think there's, we could talk about this for 2 hours, and I've got in the book. So I think there's a lot of other stuff that men can do, but I think that is a good starting place,
Absolutely.
and you see what comes up for you.
So I think self-discovery is so important. And George, I've got my final question for you before you can escape this podcast.
No, it's been good. It's not an escape.
Cheers. The final question is, we've spoken about how women can help women. We've spoken about how men can help men. But I think it will be naive not to ask this question, and that's how can men support women in the feminist act? Because I think that plays a vital role in this equality barrier that we're trying to crush.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I mean, if this is it's a big one, right? Like same with what we talked about masculinity. So I think there's no simple quick fix, but I think some of the things that I'm trying to do actively for myself is pay attention, change who you're listening to. So I'm making a conscious effort of following women on LinkedIn, reading about the stuff they're posting about. I see women on there talking about things like perimenopause or menopause or pregnancy, stuff that I just can't relate to at all and never will. But I think where maybe I used to have just would have scrolled on by because it's not really about me, actually it will impact me in some way. Touch wood, my girlfriend might be pregnant at some point. I'm going to have to go through this stuff and understand it. But I think it's important that even if I don't, we do know what other people around us are facing. So I do take time to read about the stuff that I don't know about or might not affect me, but it would be good to learn about. And I make a conscious effort to try and engage with stuff in some way. Like I'll, consciously like some of these posts from women just to kind of give it a bit of reach and hopefully other people can see it. So I think, it's important that we listen to this stuff and then give women a platform and a voice and, elevate them where we can, where, they might not have had it for so long. So I think that that's really, really important. And I think actively taking time to talk to women about their experiences as well. I think we can't assume, but actually seek out women, whether it's in your life, colleagues, people you don't know, engage with someone in the comments. Take time to listen to women and their experiences and what they've been going through and how they're feeling. Because again, we just don't know. In the same way that women won't be able to relate to a lot of our experiences, and it's on us to sort of educate. I think we need to listen to women on the other side. So yeah, I think that is really, again, the sort of starting point: listening, education, elevate women where you can. And then I think beyond that, it is important to call out bad behaviour. I think men do have a role in standing up for women or calling out bad behaviour. And again, this isn't this. I've seen some women sort of not like that sometimes in the past because they feel like it's men sort of playing on the masculinity complex again of sort of wanting to come in as like shining knights or whatever. So there's probably a way of doing it that isn't about having to feel like you're rescuing a woman. But again, we can only know that by talking to women. We have to understand from their side and what do they need and how can we best support them. And yeah, that it does mean, I think that does mean at points calling out bad behaviour, and particularly in male groups, like they are very banter heavy. Sometimes that banter and that joke, those jokes, they can go too far and they can be a bit degrading. And again, I think it needs some. It is a really brave thing to do, but it does need someone in the group to be like, mate, that's probably a bit too far. So I think, those are some of the ways, but really for me, it's just been trying to learn from women, just learn their experiences and what they've been feeling. And it's been really eye-opening, and it shows me how little I actually know, to be honest, about some of the stuff that women go through. So I think it's a lifelong kind of education piece, really.
I love that. I really do love that because silently I've been doing the exact same thing. I've been following more women on LinkedIn. I've been reading their stories. I've been engaging with their stories. I've even DM'd a lot of women and we have really nice conversations. Because you think instantly, oh, you're a guy, you're going to DM lady and it's going to, go all pet. Actually, you know what? Like, I've never had a bad response. I've never had a, oh, bugger off, nothing. It's been, let's talk. And I love that. So it shows that communication is there, it's present, it can happen. We've just got to start making it happen. And George, sorry, I have got one final question for you. Is where can people find you? Where can people follow you and follow your story?
I'm most active on LinkedIn, so I imagine we'll put the link in the
I'll
comments.
put the link in the bio. Yeah,
Yeah, so most active
absolutely.
on LinkedIn, and then my book's coming out in January. So hopefully, some people are inspired to read it.
I'll be one of the first to grab a copy, and I'll place an order today,
Thanks.
because I believe you said the pre-launch is ready the pre-order's ready. Is that right?
Went live today. Went live today, so
Yeah.
it's good. It's good timing actually.
Yeah. All right. I'll make sure to hit that pre-order button today. But thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Fish. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, like I'm really passionate about this stuff and doing it in a compassionate way that kind of acknowledges everyone's experiences. So I'm always keen to talk more on this, and if anyone does want to connect me on LinkedIn or drop me a message, then yeah, happy to go back and forth on it.
Wicked. Sounds great. Thank you.
Cheers.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Honestly, the more people we reach, the more support we can offer. And don't forget, Onward Shift isn't just a podcast. We've got a number of resources on our website, so please don't forget to check out www.onwardshift.com, where you'll find counsellors, keynote speakers, coaches, blogs, and so much more. Until next time, don't forget to keep having these important conversations.